Hello, everyone, and welcome from me, John Denton, to another Business Ready for Sale podcast. I think this is the first time I've done an intro before the intro that I do when I'm recording podcast, but I had Charlie Gunningham, WA Entrepreneur of the Year, on my podcast this time, and I just wanted to tell you to look out for some of the things that Charlie's going to talk about. There's so much in this podcast for business owners and would-be business owners. I just want to give you some tips, some things to listen out for. Listen out for the trend is your friend. So what kind of trend does Charlie say is the best kind? Charlie gives us a distinction as well between a startup and starting up. So listen out for that. That's very interesting. And the life cycle of one of his businesses, in fact, his first business from startup to exit, and some of the things that he went through and the lessons that he learned, absolutely gold. And also why you shouldn't fall in love with your product or service. Now, a lot of us do that, and Charlie tells us why we shouldn't be doing that and who we should be falling in love with. And there's much, much more. So let's get into the podcast and listen to Charlie and learn. Welcome, everyone, to another Business Ready for Sale podcast. Business ready for sale because a business that's ready for sale is well worth keeping. And the things that you do to get your business ready for sale quite often will lead to people saying, I don't want to sell this business anymore. So these podcasts are all about growing your business, making the business run without the business owner being there, so that you can step back from the business and put it under management, or you can sell it. And it's my great pleasure today to have the recently or newly crowned WA Entrepreneur of the Year, so Western Australian entrepreneur in the recent INCITE Awards. So Charlie Gunningham. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, John. Thank you. I think you just coined a new word, entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The Entrepreneur of the Year is the entrepreneur.
Yes, I'm all for creating new words. So it's great to have you here, Charlie, after your recent success in those INCITE Awards as well.
Thank you.
The reason I've got Charlie on, and I love talking to Charlie, is because I don't know too many people who've gone from being a teacher to being a business owner and entrepreneur and winning, Entrepreneur of the Year awards. And Charlie's taken businesses from startup, grown them, exited them, sold them, and that's what we're all about. So
I'm a bit of a cliche, John. I think every economics teacher or business teacher thinks they have a business in them. Every English teacher thinks they have a novel in them, and every music teacher thinks they have an album in them. So one day I will publish that novel or that album, or one day I will do a business. So I think when I was teaching, 13 years teaching in England, Singapore, and Australia, I thought if the right thing came along, I might give it a crack. Teaching's not going away. If it didn't work, I could always go back to teaching. I wasn't sort of actively seeking anything, but it came out of the blue, actually, and I'm happy to tell that story, if you like.
Please do.
So you can probably tell from my accent, originally from England, always wanted to come to Australia since I first came here in the 80s. Older brother had moved to Brisbane and is still there, retired, Robert. And I came for his wedding in 84. And as soon as I landed in Australia, I knew I wanted to come to Australia and live. Finally got here in 97, but I had 7 years in Singapore before that. Came to do an MBA at UWA, so a master's in business. I thought, well, I'll be a headmaster one day, an MBA will be useful. Came out the other side of the MBA, having taught some lessons at Hale School. So I'd met John Inverarity, the headmaster then, through my cricket connections in Singapore. And he said, if you ever come down to Perth, give us a hoy. And as it happened, by amazing chance, he needed a couple of economics classes taught. So I did that while I did my MBA. And then out the other side, so in 99, I was full-time teaching, head of commerce at Hale, coaching cricket, got my MBA, fantastic. But don't know if you remember 99, it was the year of the dot-coms. Remember them?
Oh, yes.
So
and Y2K.
Everyone was setting up Y2K bug. Remember that? Everyone was setting up dot-coms. So I met this guy called Nick on the MBA. He's a Swiss American. He was here because his wife's from Perth. And we both got chatting about how ludicrously old-fashioned and irksome it was buying property, charging around the home opens, waiting for the Saturday paper. Half the ads didn't have the price or the address in. So cut a long story short, he and I developed a .com called AussieHome.com. So I'm still teaching full-time at Hale, right? He's looking for something to do, and we're sort of doing this in weekends and evenings. And we spent most of 99 sort of going, well, how are we going to do it? What's the market landscape look like? Who's out there already doing it? Most of the sites were pretty bad, to be honest. This was before realestate.com came to Perth, before Domain. Rewa was around, but they had a site called rewa.net, but most of the properties on there weren't really up to date, and there weren't many on there. So you had to wait for the weekend papers. It was a bit ridiculous. And we weren't the only ones. So we thought, well, the future, at least for search, for property search, is going to be online. You might not be buying your property online, but at least you can do your search online. And I think, John, I always thought there was going to be doors shut in our face. And we went, oh, nice idea. I'll go back to teaching, At least we gave it a bit of a shot. But it was quite the opposite. Doors kept opening. And one door that opened was when we found that Perth was a center of mapping expertise. You take a remote mining town like Perth or Vancouver, and there you shall find mapping technology. So when we thought, well, we're sitting in one of the global centers of mapping technology, and we wanted to put properties on maps on the net. As my brother used to say to me, and he was he worked in property for the Halifax Building Society in England. He said, property's the three L's. The three L's: location, location, location. He used to say. It's all about location. So I thought, well, if we could locate on a map, actually see where they are, people could look and search in the suburb, see how close it was to the schools and the parks and the beaches or whatever. That would be useful because, Lisa and I used to charge around the home opens with a map, working out what the directions and where these properties were, So that's what we did. And we launched AussieHome.com to the world.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And I quit my job. I went into John Inverarity's office and said, I want to do this crazy .com venture.
What was his reaction to that?
It's funny because I said, I've got two pieces of news, John. You can take these. One of these can be good news and one of these could be bad news. I'll leave it up to you as to which is which. I'm resigning because I want to do this .com internet venture, but I'd like you to be on our board. And he said, oh, can't you stay? And, you can do this part-time. And I said, no, look, I feel to do this justice, I have to give it a good crack. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back with my tail between my legs. At least I've given it a go. But, teaching's not going away. But I'd love you to be on the board because we really admire you as a leader. And, he knows everybody. And he just said, absolutely, I'm happy to be on the board. And for the first 7 years of our existence, he actually was on our board. And someone I still catch up with, John. He's a wonderful guy.
Interesting. And because I think Google Maps started in Perth, didn't it? It was an Aussie company.
Actually started in Sydney, yeah.
Sydney.
Google, but yeah, it was developed by Lars Rasmussen in Sydney in about 2004-05, I think. So yeah, so we spent so we were really quite innovative and pioneering because I don't think anyone else had done a map-based real estate website anywhere, not that I can find. So little old AussieHome.com was the first map-based property website here in the western suburbs in Perth. And we had about 4 different mapping providers and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on maps. Big mistake. That's a big mistake looking back. Yeah. And then Google brings out maps and gives it away for free. Great.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things when I'm looking at businesses and when buyers are looking at businesses, is it internet proof? And, now is it COVID proof? But anyway, that's a more recent thing.
Yes.
So what happened to the AussieHome.com?
Well, it was really tough. As you know, breaking into a new industry is really tough, especially when you've got big incumbents like the West Australian and the Sunday Times. And, the agents are just used to putting their money in a wheelbarrow and wheeling it to the weekend papers. And they have been doing that for 50 or 100 years. So trying to get the agents, real estate agents, love them though I do, big egos that they are, Trying to get them to change was really hard. And one thing I learned, John, in all businesses is the trend is your friend and the best changes happen slowly. Now, if you can stay alive long enough for the change to sort of move in your direction, then that's great. But if you can't, you're gone. And, that's the end of that. So we had to find a way by hook or by crook, because this shift to the internet in advertising, from print to digital, happened really over 10 years. When we started in the year 2000, end of 99, 2000, probably 90% of real estate agents' marketing budgets went to print. By the time we sold to Rewa in 2010, 10 years later, probably 90% of their budgets went to digital, but it took 10 years.
Yeah.
So you can't really say, on one date, the 4th of April, 2004, the internet changed. No, it was one of these slow, inexorable changes in our favor. And we've seen what's happened to the West Australian and the Sunday Times. And, didn't the West basically buy the Sunday Times for $1? I mean, that tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you've seen what's happened to the West Australian share price over the last 20 years. So they were the dominant. They could have completely owned the internet. They chose not to. And that allowed little internet pioneers to come in and take the market. And I suppose first 18 months to answer your question was really tough. A couple of times in that first year in 2000, I didn't know we were going to survive. And I thought, lots of sleepless nights and stress and what the hell have I done throwing away my head of commerce job at Hale School? I could be paid to be on holiday right now. I didn't realize how good that was.
Yeah,
I'm on holidays and I'm still getting paid. It's certainly quite a leap out from a secure job, but I'm glad I did it, gave it a go. And, Nick and I had each other, and the agents we got on in the Western suburbs stuck with us. And then we developed some products that we could actually make revenues from, and then eventually profits. And I would say, this is why I like startups, John. Breaking into a market is hard. Taking on incumbent is hard. But if you can do it, if you can find a weakness and keep plugging away and love your customers and find out what their problems are and solve them for them using technology, then there is a future. Just keep doing it. And every year we got to the end of the year, we're still alive. We looked around, that's good. And we have more clients and we got a bit more money and paying ourselves a little bit more, because as founders, we get paid last. And every year I got to the end of the year and we thought, well, we'll keep doing it. But it probably took 5 years until we were really profitable, such that I'd say we stood on our own 2 feet, profitable. And we were pretty much, I think, profitable every quarter after that, increasingly so. So we paid dividends to shareholders. And so I'd say it was a business after 5 years. It was a startup for the first 18 months, not knowing whether it was going to survive or not. And it was sort of still up and down a bit from 18 months through to 5 years. But the second 5 years was very entertaining because we were very profitable then.
So would you say that's a typical sort of life cycle for a business from startup, to getting scaling up and becoming established?
And I like at this stage to define a startup, what I mean by startup. So no disrespect to anyone who starts a shop or a fish and chip shop or a jewelry store. No disrespect to them. Great businesses, so they are accounting, legal practice. They're not startups. They may be starting up, but they're not a startup. So a startup is a disruptor. A startup is a scalable business. That's why they're interesting. That goes into an industry or takes on an incumbent or both, or creates a new industry and can scale at incredible speed and earn super profits once they scale. But of course, because it's so hard, most of them won't work, right? And it is a bit like banging your head against a wall for 5 years until it works. It's hard. Now, that is the attraction in some respect, because the payoff can be great, but it's really hard. But take a company like Canva that came from Perth, CANVA, which I use every day. I remember when they started in 2012. in Perth. An idea that Mel and Cliff had off the back of their previous business. Now they're worth 9 years later, $20 billion. This sort of capital creation and wealth creation wasn't really available to our generation or our parents' generation. It's quite exciting. So that's the attraction of startups, scalable businesses that can create amazing wealth quite fast. But even in Canva's case, it took a few years until they took off. It wasn't instant. If you look at Uber or Airbnb or any of them, Facebook, Google, most of them didn't even have a business model for the first few years until they found it. And then they went boom.
Yeah.
And it's that valley of death, those early years where a lot of them don't get through it. They don't have enough capital to get through it.
Wow. Talking of capital, investors, you know, I hear good stories and I hear bad stories about getting investors in to grow a business. What's your views on that?
Well, very important. I mean, not every startup should be funded. Some of them will probably, you know, be barking mad and crazy, and you have to sort of tell them that, you know, in diplomatic terms. Because really a startup is sort of getting going, hopefully on a, you know, smell of an oily rag and working their way through a customer problem. We had to pivot a few times until we worked out what the problem of real estate agents was. We got it wrong at the beginning. It took us 18 months to figure out what problem we were solving for them. And then I think the light bulb moment came on. So you have to be patient as an investor. You've got to see it as a 3 to 5 to maybe 7 year journey. You've got to be a passive investor. You're not running the company they are. Come in and help when needed. Otherwise, stay out the way and just support and be a mentor and advise. We were very fortunate to have 3 of our MBA professors who we admired, who we went to with the idea, invest in the company. And some high net worth individuals like John Poynton, we were very fortunate to get on. We had one e-commerce professor, visiting American, called Jack Pendray, who put 50 grand into us, and then post.com crash put another 100 into us. Without Jack, we absolutely wouldn't have survived that first year, but he didn't want to see us fail and wanted to give us another roll of the dice. You know, it's people like that, without John and Jack and others, absolutely wouldn't have survived those first few years, and there would have been no Aussie home. And I'd have gone back to teaching. That's fine. I would have, you know, given it a go. But without them, hats off to them. And they're the people we need. And in Perth, you know, I think it's true that Perth has more self-made millionaires than any other city in the world. If not, I'll keep repeating it till it becomes true. But it's something I heard somewhere. But unfortunately, John, in this sector, in the tech startup sector, only 0.3% of all capital invested in WA companies goes to Perth startups. 0.3%.
Wow.
It's very, very small. So last year, $8 billion was invested in WA companies. Only 25 million of that went to early stage tech. And 17 million of that went to 2 companies. Wow. So, you know, everyone else was scrabbling around for 8 million, and it's just not enough.
A couple of interesting things you said. Well, a lot of interesting things you said, but in particular, passive investors. I've seen businesses go belly up because the investors got in and wanted to take control, wanted too much of a say in what was going on. So a lot of owners, I think, become very wary about getting investors on board. It's finding the right people. Those people you had were fantastic by the sounds of it.
Yes.
They put the money in, but let you do your thing.
Yes. And then they were there because they had skin in the game. They were there when we needed help, when we needed emotional support, when we needed advice. So we would go and have lunch with a John Poynton, and we could get access to John because he was an investor. You know, we get access to John in Verity, Jack Pendray on our board, a few other people. Peter Lee from Hassel, I remember, was fantastic early investor as well. I still catch up with Peter. You know, really, really good people. And what they would do is very often pump our tires up and send us off again because it was hard. It was like you know, the Christians to the lions, thrown in the den. It was hard, you know, selling to real estate agents, getting them on board, and then trying to get this thing to work. And then, of course, as soon as it is working, you're then getting hit by some bigger companies like realestate.com and Domain and others coming along as well. Clearly, realestate.com have won that battle. But yeah, being passive, but not being too passive, being there to lend your emotional support. And what I thought they were very good at is we get very tied up as founders, running the day-to-day, looking at our shoelaces. What the board and mentors are very good at is saying, well, where are you going? Look at the horizon. Get you to think strategically. Really important. Sage-like wisdom that they imparted. Absolutely fantastic. Couldn't have done it without them. Not just the money, but that support and advice. And, and also I think when you didn't want to let them down. You wanted it to work out for them.
Yeah.
Because they'd backed you when you were nothing, when you were just an idea.
Yeah, you had somebody that believed in you.
And to be honest, John, there could have been a few moments in that year 2000 when we could have just given up. No one probably would have blamed us, but we didn't want to let them down. We want to keep going, give it the best shot we could.
Sure. And you did. And I think, didn't Rewa take it over?
So, after 10 years, we were acquired by Rewa in a very friendly takeover. Anne Arnold, the CEO, I'd always gone on very well with, and Neville, the CFO. He's now the CEO. And by then, realestate.com had taken over, and Rewa are the sort of not-for-profit member organization, a very impressive real estate institute. And Rewa.com was kicking along, but I always thought could do a better job. So literally a coffee with Anne in, I think it was March or April 2010. 6 weeks later, deal done, signed by the council. And 10 days later, I walk into Rewa and running Rewa.com, and all my team are now employed by Rewa. So it was a really good exit. I'd spoken to everybody else. The West Australian had come sniffing, realestate.com, Domain, a few others, private equity. But I just felt the best deal was let's go into Rewa, and that to me was the right thing. Got the price I wanted, exit for all the shareholders. They've been paid dividends for the last few years anyway. And then the ultimate is obviously an exit.
Yeah, it's great.
Sale.
I tell people the reason you start a business is to sell a business. And the ideal is when people come to you wanting to buy your business, if you can set yourself up to be bought by a bigger, look at LinkedIn. How much did Microsoft pay for LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
It was billions.
Yep.
And Unilever, who bought Dollar Shave Club.
Yep.
I don't know if you know the Dollar Shave Club story. I'm sure you do. But, you make yourself so attractive that these guys are going to come and buy you up.
Yeah. So I think most businesses would be sold to another business. So you've got to think, what is the value in your business to a bigger business? You always got to think in your head. But like you said with your intro, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to sell. I always thought to myself, if I run this for 20, 25 years and my children work in it, I'll be incredibly proud and happy at that moment and happy for that. Or a mate comes in, or someone younger generation, or someone internal ends up taking over the CEO, and old Charlie boy's retired off to the beach or whatever. That's fine. But saw an opportunity that was actually a moment in time. And probably 10 years in, all my wealth was tied up in Aussie Home, didn't have much in the bank. When was I going to crystallize all this decade of effort and worth that was, dividend was very nice, and I was now getting a proper salary, but, it was increasingly competitive. Realestate.com were dominant. And I saw an opportunity to maybe crystallize that. Shareholders have been very patient, 10 years. And also an opportunity to get safe and secure employment for my staff, and to make sure my clients were looked after. So it ticked all the boxes. And Rewa were fantastic. Anne and Neville and Rewa looked after my staff, paid them at least what they were paid at Aussie Home, took a very sort of avuncular view of them, and I'll forever be grateful for that. That was a really good exit, and I'm still on really good terms with Neville. Catch up with what I'm doing now with the Property Tribune. We're chatting with Rewa, obviously, and I know the president, Damien Collins, very well, and a lot of Rewa members, obviously, still. So a lot of them are very good friends of mine.
So a fantastic outcome. Just going back a little bit, something else you've said a couple of times, which I try to get across to particularly people that I'm meeting early on, or they're early on in their business. It's what problem are you solving for your target market?
Yes.
You've said a few times, we solved a problem.
Yes.
We solved a problem for the real estate agents.
Yes. And we got that problem wrong. We didn't know what the problem was. So I sit down with startup founders now, I want to hear that. And when I see their slide deck, I want to see the first slide has got to tell me the customer problem, and hopefully absolutely a big, hairy global problem that maybe no one else has seen. and they can solve. When I see that slide and it's a really good articulated problem, I sit back, I go, yes, I get that. You've really got a big problem here to solve, because you can make business very complicated, John. I like to make things really easy. So anything I can cope with is something that's really easy. Solve a customer problem. The customer is the person paying you. Solve a problem. You create value for them. If you create value for them, they will pay. If they pay, you've got a business. It's pretty simple. So it goes all back to customer problem. So Nick and I got the customer confused. Our customer was obviously the real estate agent, but we built a site, a map-based real estate site, which was really for home buyers and renters. But they weren't paying us anything. In fact, if anything, they were costing us something. Every time they came to the site, it cost a bit of bandwidth. Not much, but they weren't paying us any money. So real estate agents were subscribing to advertise their properties. Now, what's the problem of a real estate agent? It's not finding buyers. Buyers buy properties. They find buyers. The real estate agent works for the seller. That's what they get their commission.
Yep.
So that is their problem, satisfying the seller and then getting more sellers. Finding more vendors. It's, as they say in real estate, list and last. So as soon as we got, that was like a light bulb moment. When we realized that, and I'll tell you, this is 18 months in, that's when we started doing websites for agents to make themselves look good. They'll use it as a listing tool. We did magazines for agents. We were supposed to be anti-print, yet for 5 years we did magazines. We did photos, floor plans. Later we'd do social media and apps, anything to make them look good in the listing interview. It was all about getting the listing. It wasn't all about making the sale. 70% of real estate agents' time and money is spent prospecting for listings. That's the game. Maybe little known. We didn't know it. We only discovered it by surfacing this, by talking to lots of real estate agents and say, tell us your problems.
Yeah, well, when I was business broking, it was the same thing.
Getting listings.
Until you've got a listing, you've got nothing to sell.
Correct.
So you can be the best salesperson in the world, but
yes,
if you haven't got any listings, you've got nothing to sell.
And when you've sold all your listings, you're stuffed. You need to always be getting new listings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in any business, you need to be getting new clients. It's it's a similar thing. But identifying that problem, it is absolutely crucial. I sometimes get approached by people who say they've got a fantastic product or a fantastic service and everybody needs it. And what they've done is they've created a solution looking for a problem.
Correct. They've fallen in love with their product. The
exactly.
biggest error that entrepreneurs make. And that's what we did. Nick and I fell in love with our maps and the site. And, we did 2 or 3 complete recodes of the site in the first 18 months. That's the fun bit. But that's not solving a problem for the customer. No. That might fill up your day and make it's fun to do. But you can R&D yourself into bankruptcy. Yeah, you've got to fall in love with your customer problem, right?
Yeah.
And spend time talking to them and listening to them. Preferably listening, not talking.
That's it is just critical. When you spent 3 years working for the government.
I did. So after REWA, I was approached by Business News founder to go and owner to go and help them with their digital transformation. That was great. So having been attacking the print, I suppose, I went in and tried to see if I could save print, a media business, and they did incredibly well. Their shift to digital was superbly done. They're now absolutely firing away. So I still write for them. I write a startup column for Business News, and I'm so proud of them. I think they're a fantastic organization. And then I saw an opportunity. After I'd done that for 4 years, I went to work for the federal government, because one thing, as I mentioned earlier, there is a lack of funding here in the local scene for startups for various reasons I won't go into. We could spend all day on that. But one solution to that is this federal government fund called Accelerating Commercialization, which was like a $500 million fund. And you could get up to $1 million grant for your early stage pre-revenue startup. So that was fantastic. I worked on that for 3 years, did a few deals, and was therefore responsible for millions of dollars of fresh capital into WA companies that maybe might not have happened. So that was fantastic.
When you were looking at those businesses for funding,
Yep.
What were the critical things you were looking for?
Well, definitely have you articulated and found a big customer problem, like a big
Yep.
global customer problem that you can solve. Do you have technology that you own or have exclusive rights to that is novel and solves that problem? And what sort of traction do you have? You got people using it. What's the market look like? How big's the market? How many competitors are there? And just you're trying to ascertain the risk, because we're putting taxpayers' money into this. Do they have a shot here? Now, it's early stage, so no one's going to blame us if it doesn't work. But I can tell you that, John, for every 50 companies, 50 companies I met and sat down with and had an hour with, I took one to Canberra for money. So
Wow.
over the 2.5 years, I took 9 to Canberra and 6 got funded. So not a bad success rate, but there's an awful lot of sifting out to find that little gem to take to Canberra and got money. Once I got them there, I had a good chance, better than 50-50 chance of getting everything they asked for. And this was, free money, if you like, but it was quite hard to get. It was quite a few months of getting the application together and keeping the business alive while you're waiting for the decision, did you get the grant?
Yeah, so any idea what happened to the others that didn't get the funding? How many of them
quite a few.
going?
Yeah, not that they weren't bad businesses. It's just, and I must say that innovation is alive and well in WA. There's a lot of innovators out there and entrepreneurs out there. I've got a list now of over 580 startups that I know of in WA, or tech businesses of various sizes. And in there will be some gold, for sure. There will be another Canva in there or something similar to it. And that's why I love the sector so much. And I've spent probably the last 20 years in it, 10 years as a founder myself, and then the last 10 years mentoring, advising. I've invested in a couple of startups. I write about startups for Business News and Startup News. And of course, now I'm in my own startup again with the Property Tribune, which I love. So
you can't help yourself, can you?
No, and that was a good friend of mine, Evan Cunningham Dunlop, who runs a very successful digital marketing agency called Living Online in Subiaco. I actually used them when I was at Business News. One of the best things I did at Business News was hire Living Online to run our digital marketing, and our traffic rose from about 30,000 a month. This is unique visitors to 170,000 a month. Wow. This is from behind a paywall over 3 years. Hard to do, but Living Online is superb. And when Evan approached me last year, and I'd finished the job at the government, and I was doing bits and bobs of consulting for various tech companies, he pitched me the idea of the Property Tribune, and I just thought it was brilliant. It was property, technology, media, startup, everything I've been doing the last 20 years wrapped into one. So he said, I want you to run it, work out how to work it, work out how to do, get the content. I've got a little news team, and then we have about 30, 40 writers around the country. So if you want to know what's going on in the property market, John, or any of your listeners, thepropertytribune.com.au, that's to go. That's the place to go.
Yes,
we're growing it, and traffic's growing, almost 80% month on month. And we're having record days after record days. So it's great.
Yeah, I did have a look at it. I mean, it's the amount of information on there is amazing. It's just incredible.
We published just shy of 2,000 articles already, and we're only 6 months old. I think on Monday we're 6 months old. So we're pumping out 15, 20 stories a day. So it's great. A lot of content.
Wow. I'll watch with interest.
Yeah.
Not that I'm in the property market or in the market for property at the moment, but
well, everyone's always interested because you've got your money tied up in property in one way or another.
Correct.
It's a $9 trillion industry. So it's a huge, huge industry.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Any what would you say your top tips are for people in business who want to grow? I mean, scaling up is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of business owners have. The biggest impediment to a good business sale is the business owner themselves, because they tend to be crucial to the business, or they've built the business around them. I've worked with a few business owners that have had good outcomes, good sales after 2 or 3 years, and it typically started with separating them from the business.
Yes. I was going to say that. I think you haven't really built a business if it totally relies on you to be there every day.
You've got to practice.
You've got a job. You've bought yourself a job or a practice, but you haven't got a business. Not really. It should be able to grow without you there, without you there. You should be able to like separate yourself from it, and your systems and processes and people can grow it without you physically having to do it yourself. Otherwise, what have you got? Totally relies on you. If you have to get up at 3 a.m. to put the bread in the oven because there's no system for that, then you're now linked to that, and it cannot scale because there's only one of you. How can you scale it if it completely relies on you? You need to actually make yourself redundant, right? And so it can just go, boom.
Yep.
And at Aussie Home, I was happy to do that. I remember I've got elderly parents who then passed away, but there were times where I could take, a month off and go back to England because mum wasn't well. And I'd just check my emails at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe. That's Perth time. It was 9 a.m. I'd get up and open up my laptop and, just checking the emails for half a day, put my laptop down, done. Because we had really good systems, really good people, and I could trust them to get on with it and it would grow.
A business runs on systems, a practice runs on an expert. And that's the difference.
Yes.
That a lot of people have got a practice when they think they've got a business.
Yes.
And the interesting
and
thing...
then you can't sell it, right? Because it totally relies on you.
Yeah, or you can
what
only
are you
sell
then
it,
selling?
You can sell it to another practice.
Yes. Yes.
But you need another practitioner, so you've got a limited market to sell to as well.
Yes.
So, but you've got to make your money while you're in the practice so that you can invest it and you've got something to retire to.
Yes.
Whereas with a business, you can build it so you can sell it to fund your retirement. It's a different strategy, different mindset. And talking of mindset, personality, I think with entrepreneurs, we have a lot of discussion in our mentoring group about what makes a good entrepreneur or what makes a good business owner. But I come across business owners sometimes who sort of make themselves, make it impossible for themselves to get out of the business because they want to be seen as being the expert or they want to keep control.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to shift that sort of mindset. If you
the best business book I read, and you might probably read it, Jim Collins' Good to Great, 2001.
Yeah.
And it talks about basically why companies scale and take off and why other companies who had the same opportunity didn't. Like a lot of companies are mediocre. They're okay. The products are okay. The people are okay. Customers are reasonably happy. But what makes the difference are ones that absolutely go stratospheric. And one of the most important things at the beginning is what he called a level 5 leader. That's a humble leader, not a show pony, a workhorse. Right? I think that was really important. And that was the case in every single business. So in other words, no one actually knew who the CEO was. Right?
Yeah.
And just went bang, 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 bang.
Yeah. It's it's difficult sometimes to get across to a business owner that the fact that they are a leader even, and a lot of them, quite a few really don't see themselves as a leader. They don't want to be a leader. They don't want to have to manage or lead people. I tell them, you lead people, you manage things.
I found that the most fun bit.
Yeah.
Frustrating at times, the hardest bit, but the most important bit.
Yeah, I've even had a friend who was a pretty good business person. And he said, look, having children is the best training you can have for having employees.
You've got to care for them, and they got to see that you absolutely care for them. Then they'll work immensely. Give them great work, and look after them, and give them opportunities to excel, and obviously pick the right people that want to do that, the self-motivated ones. But create a great culture. Have fun. Oh, goodness me. I mean, we only come around once, John. I don't believe we come back as a tortoise. I think this is it. So, you spend a lot of time at business. You enjoy it. It can't be a toxic workplace. It's got to be a fun, productive. Everyone's getting on. We're getting achievements. And then when the it does hit the fan, we all cobble together and we work it out and we get through it together. Live or die together. Those dark moments in 2000 were very good for team building, but none of us wanted to go back to them once we got through it. It was good we went through it, but we did not want to go back to them.
No, that's right. when the pressure's on, a good team pulls together and a poor team falls apart. So
yeah,
you've got to build a good team. So we're coming to the end, Charlie. What's Charlie doing now, and how can people get in contact with you? Or
thank you. Well, the Property Tribune is my main activity. I do have a few other startups, as I say, I've invested in that are at very much the early stage. So the Property Tribune, you can contact me on there, and I'd love people to have a look at it, see what they think of it. We also invite real estate agents who are listening to this, or any real estate to contribute. We have a 30 or 40 real estate agents around the country who write for us, right? So you can write for the Property Tribune. So it's like a collaborative exercise. And how you might think, how do we monetize it? What's am I drinking my own Kool-Aid here? What customer problem am I solving? Well, if I can tell you in a nutshell, in a very crowded marketplace for real estate news and property news, we want to be the one place where you can go and get good, clean, independent, what's going on in the property sector down my street, whether it's buying, selling, renting, investing, commercial, residential, technology, media, whatever. So if you're an investor, if you're looking to buy, looking to rent, you're looking to sell, what's the data telling us? We try and put together every day, like what is happening in a clean, independent, don't have any axe to grind here. We're not selling you a development or some sort of how to get rich quick scheme like a lot of the other sites. We're not behind a paywall. And we then provide a platform for real estate agents to developers and other people to tell their stories. So we have sponsored content, we have advertising, other ways of monetizing the site, which we're doing right now. And that's, I suppose, all the tricks and things I've learned along the way through media and property. So having the time of my life. And would you believe it? We are the second biggest publisher already of property news in the country.
And that's in 6 months.
6 months.
Unbelievable.
We are putting out more content on property than the Australian or the Fin Review or the West Australian or Business News or any traditional media. In fact, weirdly, the only one who beats us, and we get close to them, some days we beat them, is realestate.com. They put out about 20 stories a day as well. You think of realestate.com as a property listing site. They actually have a lot of news that they pump out.
How do people find it?
thepropertytribune.com.au. Easy. Okay. Or just Google Property Tribune. You'll find us. And you can subscribe and you'll get an email, which again, all this is free. An email daily at 3 o'clock WA time or 5 o'clock over East with all the sort of main news of the day. So it just keeps you up to date with what's going on in the property market, which, as I say, is a massive market. It's a $9 trillion industry. I mean, it's just ridiculous, really. It's sort of 4 or 5 times the size of the Australian economy is the property. Yeah. I mean, we really like our property in Australia. I know we like our mines and our resources in WA, but the property market dwarfs everything.
And I like the fact that you said a few times that it's independent. I think people love to get that independent view.
If people read an article about developments in the Gold Coast and it's salesy, and they're obviously trying to sell the development, they're trying to sell apartments. People smell that and they'll never go back again. It's got to be an independent, tick out all the adjectives, put it in context, and then give an honest, fair view. And so I'm glad to be back in media, and absolutely that line of independence and truth, as far as we can do it, is what we try and do at the Property Tribune. Because there's a lot of spin merchants out there taking advantage of retirees and all the rest. It's disgraceful.
The truth will win in the end.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
But what did Churchill say? A lie gets around the world before the truth gets its pants on.
I hadn't heard that one, but that's an excellent one, and that's a good one to finish on, I think.
Great talking to you, John. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, we could talk all day. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Great to have the Western Australian Entrepreneur of the Year on my podcast. So thank you very much, Charlie.
My pleasure, John.
Good luck with your venture.
Thank you, and to you.
Wow, what a great session that was with Charlie Gunningham. And wrapping up, I just want to give you a summary of some of the takeaways that I got from it. The trend is your friend, and the best change happens slowly. And if you can stay alive long enough for the change to move in your direction, you'll succeed. And what a great learning that was. And Charlie talked about the shift from print to digital advertising in real estate and homes. So the trend is your friend. Then he talked about his life cycle of his first business, from going from a teacher to being a business person, entrepreneur, and how the first 18 months were really that startup phase and very difficult. But then having got through that and survived that part, it was then up and down for the next 5 years. So it ended up being another 5 years after that before, well, it was in the second 5 years of that 10-year period that the business was really cranking and working like a business, and Charlie felt like he'd got a business, and the time came to exit. He explains why you would exit a business. He gave us a definition of a startup as well, as opposed to starting up. A startup is a disruptor, a scalable business that goes into an industry or takes on an incumbent or both, or creates a new industry. And he explained how from that, one of the first questions that he asked and things he wanted to see from a startup business when he was working for the government and providing funding for startups was, what problem do you solve? What's the big problem that you solve for your clients? And he talked about, don't fall in love with your service or your product, but fall in love with your customers and the problem that you solve. If you solve a problem, you add value to your customer. If you add value to your customer, they will pay you. Lots of things. He talked about banging his head against the wall for 5 years. Yeah, just some fantastic takeaways. Once again, I thank Charlie very much for coming on and giving up his time and helping us all to learn from his past experiences. So from me, John Denton, if you want to know more about getting your business ready for sale, because a business that's ready for sale is well worth keeping, or if you'd like a business ready for sale assessment, then you can go to my website at johndenton.com.au. And I look forward to you being on the next podcast. Some really exciting people coming up. So bye for now.